into roll call, starting with President Linahara.
Here.
Vice President Chaput, present. Treasurer Weddle. Here. Secretary LaSorsa. Here. Vice Treasurer Hokanson. Here. Chief Justice Wu. Here. Chief of Staff. Here. Director of PR. Here. Director of Wellness and Inclusion. It's not here. Pro Tem Ludewan. Here. Senator Beckman. Here. Senator Fatima. Here. Senator Fisher. Here. Senator Joseph. Here. Senator Capo. Here. Senator Khan. Senator Novak is excused for lateness. Senator Pena. Here. Senator Rose. Here. Advisor Artajani. Here. Advisor Wadsworth. Here. Webb. Here. CFB. Here. Wildcat Media. Here. Wildcat Esports. Here. College Council Rep is not here. SAC is not here. And ResLife is not here. That concludes roll call. Moving on to the approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion for the minutes of Tuesday? Seeing no. Pro Tem Ludewan.
Mention and probably a question to the secretary. On the top of the third page, the first motion stated there only shows who was entertained by. The so moved and second are missing. Give it clarity on that, please. Thank you.
I think I just missed who did it, and the recording wasn't working. So, like, the audio for the recording wasn't working. I don't think so. I can hear it.
Alrighty. Is there any further discussion for the minutes of 4:14? Seeing none, we'll go into voting. Does anyone not approve of unanimous approval? Fisher, is that your hand up? Oh, okay. Seeing no disapproval, that passes unanimously. Moving on to today's agenda. Is there any discussion for today's agenda? Treasurer Weddle?
I'd like to entertain a motion to strike old business from the agenda and to move the 2026 to 2027 budget to the top of new business. Thank you.
So moved.
So moved by Senator Beckman. Is there a second? Second by Senator Capo. Going into discussion of the amendment of the agenda. Treasurer Weddle?
We're very close to the end of the semester. The budget hasn't been discussed whatsoever. There's a lot of things in this budget that are different from last year. There's a lot of new things. I don't think we're going to get through old business today, and I'd very much like to at least open the discussion on the budget. Realistically speaking, at the moment, this is the most important item of legislation on the table. If we don't get through this budget, there's not going to be a budget for next year. It makes it impossible for our organizations to plan over the summer. The summer is usually a very good time for them to plan those things out. We had to deal with that last year where we had to create a budget midway through the fall semester. It was very bad. It's a lot better for everybody if we can just get our budget passed. That's not to say that the Senate should be a rubber stamp. Again, there's a lot of things that are different in this budget, and it should be discussed thoroughly, and to have the time to discuss it thoroughly, I think we need to start doing so today. I yield.
Senator Fisher?
If we get through debate with the budget, is it possible we can ask for a motion to go back to old business?
The motion was to strike out old business, meaning that it would just be gone. We'd be moving on to whatever is next in new business. Senator Rose?
In the pro-temp meeting, we discussed continuing the contract until then striking the other thing we moved with old business and then moving the budget.
Pro Temp Ludewan?
I mean, it was discussed that we feel like since we had kind of a cutoff on the contract update, that we should continue on that, and then we would move after that immediately into the budget resolution. As it is a resolution, we do not need a 2-week for it to be passed. While I do get that we should not pass the budget in one meeting, we do have 4 other remaining meetings after this meeting today, so I think we still would have enough time to talk about the contracts and start discussion on the budget as well. Yeah, that's where I'm standing. I yield.
Treasurer Weddle?
Based on how the conversation went last meeting for the contract bill, I think it'll be a very lengthy conversation unless someone tries to cut it short. I don't think we should be cutting discussion short because we're trying to get to the budget, which again is more important than the contracts update. The budget is a resolution, but it's required to be on the table for 2 weeks before it passes. While we do have 4 meetings left, I do want everyone to keep in mind that one of those meetings is going to be taken up entirely by the resolutions to instate new organization heads. That's the same process as it is for when we bring on an acting senator or something of that nature, right? So that means we have their candidate come up, we read the resolution, they present a bio, they answer some questions, we go into executive session, we discuss the candidate extensively, the Senate votes, then we have to do that 3 more times for the remainder of the orgs. So we don't really have 4 meetings left, we really have 3. And the budget, I think, is going to take all of today if we do start discussing it right now. Again, there's a lot of things in here. I would hope the Senate has questions. I really don't think we're going to get through the contracts update quickly, and I would much rather that we have the first time we read this be this week, not next week. I yield.
Senator Fisher? We have a motion to call to question. Is there a second? Seeing no second, that motion dies. Back into, sorry. Was that a call to question? Second? Okay, we have a second. Go into voting on the call to question. All those in favor of the call to question, please raise your hand. All those opposed? And all those who abstain? Can I ask for the reason of abstention? Okay, that passes 8-1-1. So the call to question passed, meaning that we will now be voting on the motion to strike out old business and move Resolution 2526-24 to the top of new business. All those in favor of this motion, of this amendment, please raise your hand. All those opposed? And all those who abstain, that passes 8-0. Back in discussion of the agenda as a whole. Is there any further discussion for today's agenda? Treasurer Weddle.
Motion to strike out from House rules the limitation of 5 minutes per member per piece of legislation. Again, the budget is going to take a very long time to discuss. I want to have all the senators and our organizational representatives to have adequate time to discuss it. 5 minutes is not adequate time. I yield.
Is there so moved? So heard by Senator Beckman, seconded by Senator Pena. Moving in discussion of the motion to strike out House rules and the limitation of discussion per individual person. Is there any discussion for this? Seeing no discussion, we'll go into voting on striking out the House rules pertaining to individual discussion per piece of legislation. All those in favor of striking out the rule, please raise your hand. All those opposed, and all those who abstain. Okay, we're going to run the vote back again. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those who oppose, and all those who abstain, that passes 10-0-0. All right, moving back into discussion of the agenda as a whole. Is there any further discussion for today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll go into voting. All those in favor of the agenda of 4/16/2026, please raise your hand. All those opposed, and all those who abstain, that passes 8-0. That concludes the approval of the agenda. Moving on to announcements. All right.
Good. Thank you. Just would like to remind the square, because it's not a horseshoe, it's actually a square. And since we have additional audience members, I would like to remind everyone at the square about decorum. And a reminder that as you're sitting in that seat, you're sitting in that seat representing your position that you receive a stipend for and not your personal representation. There is a microphone for audience members that can be used, but please remember that you're representing your position and that we follow Robert's Rules, SGU policy, SUNY system policy, as well as SUNY Polytechnic Institute policy. So there are a lot of factors and things that we are required and we will be following during this meeting. So I yield. Thank you.
Alrighty, we're on the announcements.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before announcing the results of the 2026 Student Government Executive Election, I want to briefly address the process that led us here. Throughout this election process, the Student Government Election Committee met several times to review concerns related to campaign conduct and compliance with SUNY Polytechnic Institute policies and SGU governing documents. All decisions were made through formal review and majority vote. I would like to second that, majority vote. The committee reviewed two main concerns. First, campaign activity in residence halls, which is not permitted under the sales and solicitation policy, which is under the student handbook. Second, poster policy violations, which include the requirement for prior approval from the Center for Student Involvement and clearly visible approval stamps. Each case was reviewed individually and outcomes were determined based on the specific circumstances and any additional information provided. Actions taken included removal from candidacy, reinstatement with required corrective actions, or continued disqualification where applicable. All candidates were held to the standard outlined in the signed candidacy form and SGU election policies. While details of individual cases will remain confidential, the committee's focus throughout this whole process have been fairness, consistency, and maintaining the integrity of the election process. I will note that questions and concerns related to the election process will not be taken at this particular moment. They will all be taken during the open forum. With that, I will now present the certified results of the 2026 Student Government Executive Election. For President, the elected candidate was Noah Lalona Haro with 73.2% of votes. For Vice President, the approved candidate was Jasmine Lutawan with 89.62% of the votes. For Treasurer, the selected candidate was Aidan Pena with 59.16% of the votes. And for Secretary, the approved candidate was Eden Kouassi with 96.24% of the votes. Thank you to everyone for participating in this election and everyone who voted. I yield.
Guest speakers, there are no guest speakers. Moving on to executive reports, starting with Lona Haro.
All right, everybody. A few things. The Swipe It Forward initiative. We've recently received a few guest meal swipes. If you have any remainder guest meal swipes that you do not use anymore, or do not plan to use for the rest of the semester, we'd really appreciate it if you donated them so that these other people that requested could have their guest meal swipes and could use them. Besides that, the executive boards are starting to work on our transition documents and training for the upcoming board. We want to ensure that the transition is smooth and that the new e-board knows what they have to do. And last but not least, we've made a few campus contributions the past month and a few more that we're planning on working on. A few months ago, we donated mangas to the library, which are accessible to any SUNY Poly students. Besides that, we're looking into donating whiteboards, rolling whiteboards to the library, and perhaps helping with the construction of a disc golf course near the Oriskany area. I yield.
All right, moving on to the Vice President report. Hello all, I've been working with the orgs to start getting the transition documents, made. The announcement was put out a couple days ago at this point to start, spreading it throughout all the orgs. Additionally, I've asked the orgs to make a end of the year report just to give basic statistics that we can give to the next org heads going forward. Those should be coming due within a week or two. From there, committees are still turning in their transition docs, getting all those things set. We're coming to the end of the year. I ask that any committees that are still working on things take, part of a meeting to just get those transition docs in. Additionally, if you are no longer having meetings after that transition doc meeting, then please make sure they're canceled, and I'll have all the minutes and agendas updated onto Engage. I yield. Treasurer report.
Hi, everybody. As hopefully everyone received, an email was sent out with the stipend direct deposit form. If you would like to receive your stipend by direct deposit, please fill out this form as soon as possible and bring it directly to auxiliary services. Do not give it to any student, no matter their position. Please just bring it straight to auxiliary services. That has your banking information. You should not be sharing it with anyone other than auxiliary services if you choose to do direct deposit. If you'd rather receive a check, the checks will likely be prepared the end of the first week of May. If you've left campus by then, auxiliary services can mail it to your preferred address. Other than that, the Vice Treasurer and I have been working closely with auxiliary services to wrap up a couple last things before the end of the year. Everybody should be on the lookout for the auctioning off of one of SGU's assets that is no longer in use. The exact process is still being determined, and it'll be announced to everybody once that's been figured out. The budget is on the table, and I'll talk about that more later. I yield.
All right, Secretary report. Director of Wellness and Inclusion, College Council, Res Life, Student SAC. All right, and our advisor. Advisor Wadsworth. All righty. Moving on to committee reports, starting with Policy Committee. Hello all. Last week we took our time to go through the transition doc and then from there continue our work on the Constitution. Pretty clearly that we are not going to have the Constitution put on the table this year, but we're trying to get it about as thoroughly completed per each article as we go. So that way the next year's committee can kind of just start with the ground running on that bill. That is about all. Our meetings are, again, 6 to 7 p.m. in Kinsella A 219 on Mondays. Would love to see you all there. We're still going to be meeting until the end of the year. Thank you. That is all I yield. Moving on to Budget Committee.
Everybody, as mentioned previously, the budget is on the table. It'll be the next thing that we're discussing once we finish with reports. I'm not expecting many changes to this budget. There are a couple that were discussed in Budget Committee regarding restricted reserves allocations, and those will be motioned in on the floor. We'll get to that more later. I yield.
Success.
We will be meeting tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. at the Student Center Theater. Also, the survey has been out, so if you see it in any posters, please check it out. There's a QR code there, and it should be very, very short. I yield.
Student Center Advisory.
Good afternoon, everyone. Next meeting, we will be working on our transition document and working on our transition document and just finishing up a little few things, and that'll be it. Probably won't have a meeting next week. I yield.
Alrighty. Wellness and Inclusion.
Sorry. So we started to work on our transition document and we're about finished. And we also have an upcoming event on April 29th, the De-Stress event. We're doing a tabling, so stop by, guys. It's from 12 to 2. Are you?
Food Committee. right, safety and facilities.
Our committee went over some of the current projects we have on the table. We will be doing tabling for safety concerns in the Student Center lobby that Wednesday. I don't know the date for sure. That Wednesday, the last week of classes at 11 a.m. to 12. We also are going to be running safety and facilities till the end of the year, and I will be working on the transition document. I yield. Also, meetings are 9 a.m. A225 in Kinsella Hall, Tuesdays. I yield.
Alrighty, class gift. Alrighty, and election committee. Alrighty, that concludes committee reports. Moving on to organizational reports, starting with Webb.
It's a fun one. It's a long one. Get ready for APOC week. It is finally here. We're starting out this Saturday at 2 in the SEMPR. We're partnering with Melissa Press and the Multicultural Affairs for their Springfest event. We will be showing the Bob Marley movie at 2 here in the SEMPR. Sunday, starting at 7 in Donovan Bottom Floor, we are partnering with Esports for their final Smash Weekly, and we are also offering Humans vs. Zombies. Monday is our comedian Derek Knopfschneider. He will be here in the SCMPR starting at 8. There's also a food bar provided. Wednesday at 8, starting in the, oh my God, I'm talking too fast. Tuesday at 8, and here will be a SC takeover for our rodeo night. We have a food bar provided, a mechanical bull that you can win a trophy if you stay on the longest, and there's also a raffle for that night as well. Wednesday at 8 in the Fieldhouse, we've got Casino Night. It is Fallout New Vegas theme. As a reminder, APOC Week this year theme is Fallout. Thursday at 8 in the Fieldhouse, we have our Grit and Wit course. This is an obstacle course and also a SMART course where you do obstacle courses, then you do like questions, and it really tests your grit and wit. And then Saturday, starting at 8, is Carnival Day After Dark. See you guys in the Fieldhouse. Reminder to everybody, you've probably seen the campus announcements. You will get them more as the days go out. Every day that you come to an event, you get a ticket for our final night raffle at Carnival Day. So we will disclose when there's days where Rodeo Night and Casino Night have their own specific tickets, and then the Carnival Day ticket is separate from that. So please look to engage in any postings you see around campus. Our table tents are set up around campus. We will see you all soon for Apocalypse Week 2026. I yield.
CFB. Wildcat Media.
Hi everyone, as today you might notice that the mics are louder than usual. This is to get the volume on the stream much higher than it usually is. Speaking about the stream, we are experiencing technical difficulties because the Wi-Fi is having problems at the school. Unfortunately, you cannot fix the Wi-Fi yourselves, so please bear with us. I yield.
Wildcat Esports.
Hello everyone. Wildcat Esports is doing well. Teams have just about finished their seasons, with some teams still playing their final matches. Additionally, as Webb mentioned, we are hosting our big finale Smash Weekly this Sunday, where there will be free food and a raffle for prizes.
Alrighty, moving on to approval of changelog. There is nothing to approve. Moving on to new business resolution 2526-24, Senator Capo.
Motion to send.
You can.
Motion to read Senate Resolution number 2526-24.
Motion to extend.
Oh, okay. Motion to accept Senate Resolution number 2526-24.
You can continue.
We, the Senate of SUNY Poly Student Government Utica, do hereby resolve, whereas Budget Committee has created a new budget for the 2027 fiscal year. Therefore, be it enacted, the SGU Senate supports and adores the attachment budget to be put in place for the next fiscal year of 2026-2027. Therefore, be it resolved that this budget will allow SGU and its subsidiaries to carry out its mission statement and cater to the students of SUNY Poly.
Alrighty. Can you also read out the attachments? Can you read out the attachments?
Attachments.
We're supposed to read out the whole resolution.
My bad. Attachments. Stipulations for restricted reserves allocations, 2026-2027 budget.
Alrighty, thank you. Now, yeah, I wasn't reading out the entire thing. I just meant the whole message of the resolution. Starting with Senator Fisher.
You split discussion for each individual organization's budget.
All right, we have a motion to split discussion between each individual organizational's budget.
Which also includes the overall. It's overall than each of the organizations. We split.
Alrighty. Is there a second? Second by Pro Temp Ludewan. Moving discussion, I just want clarification from the maker of the motion. Is there a particular order you want this to be in? Or is it just as listed?
Can I please have the chair?
Yeah, that was a
Okay.
point of clarity.
So I want to split so it goes executive, org, then back up to the overall.
Alrighty. Is there any further discussion for the motion? Treasurer Weddle?
The senator to rescind their motion, or just re-clarify in that I believe it would be better for us to start with the summary page and then move on to the organizations afterwards. I yield.
I motion to split discussion split discussion of the bill. Resolution. And for each section, the summary, the orgs, so that it goes the summary first, then each organization.
Alrighty. Is there a second? Second by Senator Pena. Moving discussion of the new amendment. Is there any discussion? Not amendment, just division of question. Just division of discussion. Is there any discussion for the division of discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll move into voting on the division of discussion per section and summary, and then going into the organizational allocations. All those in favor of the division of discussion, please raise your hand. All those opposed, and all those who abstain, that passes 10-0-0. All right, starting with the summary, as was the division of discussion, Treasurer Weddle.
I want to just apologize. I didn't realize when this resolution was submitted, the summary page doesn't correctly pull the numbers from the organizational budgets. So when you're looking at the summary of allocation, those numbers are all blank. You can, of course, view them in their respective organizations, but I also just sent out, as a reply to the agenda and minutes, a link to the live budget. This is also the budget spreadsheet that I'll be updating if and when any amendments are made to the budget on the Senate floor. I did want to just sort of go briefly over the differences in this budget compared to last year's. Most of the changes were due to changes in expected revenue. Last year we had close to $50,000 unallocated because we were expecting a revenue, right, student enrollment, adding up to about $530,000. This year, the actual numbers that we had this year brought us closer to $583,000, so we had a lot of money that we weren't expecting. That's now reflected in this actual budget, which is why in the change 2026 to 2027 column, you see increases for almost every single organization. We're not going over budget, we're just using the remaining revenue that we hadn't been allocated, that we didn't allocate for this year. You'll also see some new reserves allocations. We've got a reserves allocation for the class gift of 2030, a reserves allocation for emergency repairs designated for Wildcat Esports, and a reserves allocation for emergency repairs dedicated for Wildcat Media. The class gift of 2030 was added because now the incoming first-year class will have the ability to start planning their class gift from the first day they set foot on campus and over the next 4 years. It means that money is there, right? They can start planning, they can start working on it. It won't actually be used until they graduate in 2030, but it will allow that process to sort of start going. For emergency repairs, esports and media both have a lot of very expensive equipment. Sometimes that equipment breaks, sometimes it doesn't. And we don't have a budget large enough where we can just give them thousands of dollars for equipment on a, well, maybe it'll break, maybe it won't. Some things they can plan to replace, they can plan to upgrade, but these two allocations are really just meant for if an arena PC breaks, it needs to be replaced, that can be done without esports having to eat away at their budget or move money around internally. The same thing with media. Each of those cameras are thousands of dollars. If one of them breaks and has to be replaced, then this allows for that to happen, even though it doesn't necessarily, even though it wouldn't come out of their internal year-to-year budget. The specifics of these reserves allocations are outlined above in the resolution, where it has the allocation stipulations. If you have any questions on those, please feel free to ask. The reserves, these are estimations. I do want to make some amendments if the Senate will entertain. I'd like to entertain a motion to modify under the summary of allocation to add a new branch labeled reserves allocation, outdoor recreational area space, with allocated 2025 to 2026 set at 0, change for 2026 to 2027 set at 85,000, and proposed for 2026-2027 also set at 85,000, and update all the numbers falling that sort of fall down, as well as insert it within the general reserves branch for the beginning 2026 to 2027 column. I'd be happy to restate that if need be.
So moved by, we're going to choose Senator Fisher. Do I have a second? Second by Pro Temp Ludewan. Okay, going to discussion on the amendment to the allocation, adding the new reserves allocation, and I would like that sent out as an email, but is there any discussion for this? Senator Beckman.
We are going to have too much money in our reserves to be allowed by SUNY to be collecting student activities fees. So we need to spend some money. And we feel campus improvement, especially outdoor campus improvement, is a very, very good way to spend it. Currently, not a whole lot of stuff to do outside on our campus, so we want to improve that. I yield.
All right. Yeah. Wildcat Media.
Body would be in charge of deciding where these funds go? Would that be a committee? Would that be the exec board? I yield to the treasurer.
All right. Is there any? Chief Justice Wu.
So would this go to things like increasing the disc golf course and outdoor volleyball nets, like stuff like that? Like, what are we talking about when it comes to outdoor stuff? I yield to Senator Beckman.
So the thing is, it could. That's the point. We want to keep it with the ability to decide where we want it to go. One of the ideas in budget committee we had was make a pickleball court somewhere. We could also, of course, make a better disc golf. You know, it's outdoor activities, so it would go towards that. I yield.
Treasurer Weddle.
Yeah, so I just sent that out. Everybody should have it. As Senator Beckman mentioned earlier, our unrestricted, undesignated reserves have gotten to an amount which exceeds the limit set by SUNY. We don't know, it's not exactly clear what SUNY will do if this happens, but the concern is that they would not allow us to collect new student activity fees, since we would essentially have thousands of student activity fees sitting unused basically in our savings account. By designating it for a specific long-term project, it drops our undesignated reserves, so we're not necessarily spending this $85,000 next year, right? But it just allows us to set it aside for that long-term project. As Senator Beckman also mentioned, one of the ideas that was brought up was a pickleball court. A basketball court was also brought up. The executive board and our advisors have been working with facilities to just kind of plan out an idea of what this would look like, right? One of the main bits that we're looking at would be the establishment of an outdoor recreational area across from Oriskany Hall. There's a lot of space up there that's really just going unused. The parking lot holds a lot of storage containers at the moment, but my understanding is a lot of those are going to be going away once the campus center opens, because they're holding a lot of various things for the campus center. The language is pretty broad on what this can be spent on. as far as who controls the spending is broadly directed by student government, so that's going to be the student government executive board. I would imagine and certainly hope that that'll be in consultation with the Senate, right, and the student body as a whole. They don't have the authority to just spend this money. It does need to follow all of our SUNY policies, and of course this is a large project that'll be occurring on campus. So there's going to be a lot of collaboration with on-campus offices as well. Don't know that this is going to be done next year, to be very frank, but this money will be set aside indefinitely until it's either spent down or returned to reserves. So it could be used for funding the disc golf course. It could be used for funding smaller recreational areas. We could set up a couple tetherball poles around campus. You could really do a lot of things with this fund. The creation of it is really just to solve the problem that our undesignated reserves are too high. We believe, we being the executive board and budget committee, believe that in outdoor recreational areas are needed on campus, and student government could do a lot to help fund them. That's why we're looking to establish this in next year's budget. Like the other restricted reserves allocations, these don't come out of our
I'm going
operating.
to cut you off there. It has
yield.
been about 5 minutes. So just to give other members a chance to kind of provide input, I do think that was a very solid coverage of it all, though. Senator Fisher, you had your hand raised.
Another recommended project for that money, if the outdoor stuff wouldn't work, would maybe be an upgrade to the late night lounge of the student center. I yield.
Pro Tem Ludewan.
A lot to be talking about for our reserves allocation, and I know we discussed it in budget committee. I also saw that you added stipulations to a stipulations document to the motion you sent out. I don't believe it was a part of the motion, though. I could be wrong, to add that into the resolution, because I feel the clarification over the stipulation is needed. I yield to the treasurer.
Yeah, I'd be happy to make another motion, depending on whether or not the original motion passes, for the explicit addition of the stipulations document. That's on me if I forgot to include it in the original entertainment. I just figured I'd send it out there so there's clarity. A lot of that language is copied over from the other restricted reserves allocations. Really the important line is the first one, which just says money is to be spent on the creation, facilitation, or maintenance of outdoor recreation areas around campus, including but not necessarily limited to the creation of an outdoor recreation area across from a Oriskany Residence Hall. I yield.
Senator Novak. All right. Wildcat Media.
I'm just going to ask again, would the people who are in charge of distributing this fund, would that be the executive board? Or would that be a committee? Or I just want a little clarification.
Okay. Treasurer Riddle.
It's broadly outlined as student government, right? Given the student government executive board oversees student government, my interpretation of the stipulations, the intention behind it, is that it's the executive board or their designee, because realistically speaking, the executive board is not going to be out there, tearing up blacktop or digging holes, right? Like, we want to create the project, we want to fund the project, but the actual implementation and much of the costs is going to be handled by someone, or the actual purchase of supplies, the actual purchase of services, and all of that is likely going to be handled by facilities, realistically speaking, and then they're going to bill us for it. Similar to the esports arena, which saw a lot of renovations, esports didn't, go through and, price out all of those changes. They just said, this is what we want to do. Facilities build them for it, and then esports paid for it. So that's very much how this is envisioned, right? The project would be planned out. I very much hope that committees would be utilized. I think it would be a great resource, as well as surveys and tabling and all sorts of gathering student input on it. But it's really up to the executive board at the end of the day as far as which areas are chosen. Excluding, it does explicitly say the creation of an outdoor recreation area across from Erskine Residence Hall. But what that looks like exactly is not solidified within this resolution because it's meant to be broad. It's meant to be open. I yield.
Senator Novak.
This is a question mostly for our advisors, but in case these projects can't be handled by facilities because they're so big or they require a lot of stuff, I don't think facilities has the capability of doing major construction such as doing concrete or stuff like that. Can the e-board hire out private contractors to build this stuff, especially if we get permission from the president or someone else involved? Or yeah, I yield to our advisors.
Yeah, great question. The quote that we got was from an outside contractor, anything that facilities can't do. They do have specific contractors that already have agreements with the SUNY system. Otherwise, you have to go through the whole bid process and all of those things. So certainly SGU would be part of those estimates and companies and all of those things. But there are a lot of guidelines and restrictions on who would get those bids and all of that. So certainly SGU would be part of working with facilities for that. But yeah, great question. I yield. Did I answer that fully? Sorry. Okay, I yield.
All right. Is there any further discussion for the amendment to the summary? Yep. Chief Justice Wu.
This is just a question for I know people were really, really bummed about free ski Fridays this year. Okay, never mind. I yield. So, are we sure we want to put all of this for just outdoor stuff when we could put it just a little bit in for that specific event that students really spoke out about? I yield to Webb.
So the issue that came up with free ski this year is, while I probably should have reached out in September at that point, and November still wasn't enough time, the dates that were given back to us didn't work with that place. The budget went up, and we then looked at all the numbers from the previous years and the numbers subsequently with the students that went to the amount we were paying. Wasn't enough evidence that we should continue. Then we did do it this year. We did the one date. Only 55 people showed up, and it was still $2,000+ dollars. So if anything right now, it's more of a discussion between the web right now and our advisors to figure out what if we just paid for the rentals, because we can't keep paying for the tickets. It's getting way too expensive.
Aren't we supposed to be doing division of questioning?
We're in a motion of the allocation of $85,000, and this discussion was asking why shouldn't it be reserved for something else like Free Ski Friday.
I would see that happening, but there's then also a free a ski club that also has it. So Webb wants to focus on other things rather than free ski. We would still host the date alongside ski club. It's not adding up right now for us. I yield.
Senator Beckman.
Outspoken about the Free Ski Friday. We will address that when it gets time to it, but the point that was made in Budget Committee is that we need to keep a balanced budget. This is, of course, coming from reserves. So bringing it, we don't want a budget that isn't balanced, even if we aren't spending as much money as we want to. We want to make sure it's balanced, and then we pull money from reserves for a project, not necessarily paying for operations. I yield.
Treasurer Weddle.
Point, and I do want to say we have had years in the past where we've had budgets that are over budget by design when our reserves have gotten high. The problem is, given where we are in the year, I don't think there's enough time for an equitable distribution of an over, say we decide we're going to have a budget that's over budget by $50,000. we don't have the time to figure out where that 50,000 is going, whether how much is going to web, how much is going to esports, how much is going to SGU, clubs, etc. There's not enough time for budget committee to meet again with all of these orgs and discuss their budget requests in light of a reserves increase. I think we're much better off keeping the budgets that were worked through quite extensively. Those in budget committee know how long those meetings were. And just kind of establishing some reserves allocations for, as Senator Beckman said, long-term projects to improve the campus. I yield.
Webb.
Comparatively between bowling and Free Ski Friday, bowling went always over 150 and was cheaper than Free Ski Friday. I yield.
Senator Beckman.
For later, you guys did schedule something at a very inopportune time for skiing. Additionally,
all right, I'm going to cut you off. That's not really relevant. Pro Tem Bludewan?
Question?
We have a motion to call the question. Is there a second? Second by Senator Rose. Going into voting on the call to question. All those in favor of the call to question, please raise your hand. All those opposed and all those who abstain, that passes 9-1-0. Going into now, the discussion has ended for the resolution as posted in the email. For the addition of the reserves allocation.
Passing the whole resolution. We're
It said
talking about
the amendment of the resolution. Anyways, on the amendment of the resolution, let me say it clearly, of the addition of the reserves allocation as posted in the email. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. All those opposed and all those who abstain, that passes unanimously. Back in discussion of the summary section of the resolution.
We just passed include the stipulations for spending it. I yield.
It was only made to add that line in the summary of allocations and then trickled down through the subsequent parts of the resolution. Treasurer Weddle?
I'd like to entertain a motion to also add within this resolution the stipulations that were sent out over email covering the outdoor recreational area. I yield.
So moved by Senator Beckman, second by Pro Tem Bludewan. Going in discussion of the additional stipulations, is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, does anyone disapprove unanimous approval? Seeing no disapproval, that passes unanimously. Back in discussion of the summary section of the resolution, is there any further discussion? Treasurer Weddle.
Entertain a motion to, under the reserves section, strike out the class gift of 2027, class gift of 2028, and class gift of 2029. The balance of each of those were transferred to the foundation for growth over the next few years. I yield.
So moved by Pro Tem Bludewan, second by Senator Khan. Going into discussion of the motion to strike out the 3 points under reserves of the class gift allocations. Is there any discussion for this? Senator Novak?
I yield to Treasurer Little.
Each of those were transferred to the foundation, so they all have $0 at the moment. It wouldn't be an accurate budget if they were still listed as 10,000. We don't have that money anymore. I yield.
All right. Is there any further discussion for the motion to strike out those 3 lines under reserves? Seeing no further discussion, we will go into voting. All those in favor of striking out the 3 class gift lines under reserves to 0, just striking them out. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed and all those who abstain, that passes 9-0-1. All right, back in discussion of the summary page as a whole. Is there any further discussion for the summary? Seeing no further discussion. Senator Beckman.
We did talk about another reserves allocation for class gift. I'd just like to ask our treasurer if we're still doing that, or no. I yield.
Treasurer Whittle.
Yes, so I would still like to do that, but I should say, I'm waiting to receive approval from the board of directors. I'm meeting with them next week, I believe, and we'll discuss it then. And if that's approved, then that'll be added to the budget next week. Thank you.
All right. Is there any further discussion for the summary page? Seeing none, we'll move on to SGUs. portion of the budget? Is there any discussion for SGU's portion of the budget? President Lunahara.
Could I get a little bit of clarification from our treasurer as to why the special projects line have been reduced to nothing?
Treasurer Weddle?
The reason it was zeroed out is now under the 12th financial policy, 12th edition of financial policy, SGU executive can perform a reserves poll on its own. So if it wants to fund any specific project, it can just do so. The reason special projects has fluctuated over the years. It used to at one point be called miscellaneous, and it was pretty much anything that the executive branch wanted to spend money on and they hadn't budgeted for. At one point in time, it had $50,000 in it. Other times, it had $20,000. It was reduced last year because, frankly speaking, the executive board itself should not have a discretionary fund to spend whatever they want on it. The reserves pool, on the other hand, has much more money, and it has to go through a sort of public approval process. It gets voted on by the Senate, discussed by Budget Committee, signed by all sorts of people, whereas if you have just this discretionary fund, the only people that it needs approval from is the advisor and the treasurer. I yield.
I would like to ask a question to the treasurer. Does this mean that this line is now removed, or is this line still active so that a reserves pool can still be put into this line as a special project? Treasurer Weddle?
So yeah, it's still available. Okay, if that answers the question, I yield.
Senator Novak?
Couple things, but I guess I can just recall it back on. Wait, also I'll go over one now. Just looking at some of the stipends, specifically the senator stipends, currently you have it set to $7,125. If you divide it by 15, that leaves it to $475 per senator, or $237.5 per semester. That's kind of an ugly number. Why didn't you round it to be a whole number, or just round it to be $250 per senator? I yield to Treasurer Weddle.
It's an ugly number. There's all sorts of ugly numbers. The concern was really balancing the budget. We did want to give senators an increase in pay for clarity. Is this an increase? This is a $25 annual increase in the senator stipend per senator. There's 15 senators, right? So any increase to one senator stipend, we reflect across all senator stipends. So it was really just, it was a $25 increase. That felt like a reasonable number. It gets divided a little ugly, but under the financial policy, the new current financial policy, your stipend might be a little ugly as well because it's prorated based off weeks. So if you work for the full semester, it'll look nice, but if you only work 4 or 6 weeks out of the semester, you might be getting an ugly number anyways. I yield.
All right, Senator Novak?
A second thing is, underneath events, we are completely removing DEI programming. This was a big debate with last year's budget also, and I'd like to bring up some of the arguments in favor of not doing that were brought up for last year's budget. One of the big things was brought up was the fact that having money delegated to DEI programming / events ensures that we'll actually have them, because we are not a monocultural institution. We have people from all different types of religions, cultures, even countries of origin. In fact, our Senate, our Horseshoe / Square already has at least a minimum 3 international students from 3 different countries on it. And if we just completely remove that, yes, that doesn't stop the fact that we're going to be using those events, but it decreases the likelihood that we are going to even do those events in the first place. Last semester, one of the arguments was, oh, we use this for the coffee house we were doing for the senators, but that no one used that except for the senators. And already, as an international student, this school does not feel diverse. Yes, there was some cultural, some religious events, I haven't seen a singular one except for Chinese New Year for East Asians. And as somebody who is East Asian, I already feel unrepresentative on this campus. The entire point of this DIY is that we will actually be using it to make events, to make students like me feel welcome and included. Just because we didn't do it this year, that's not a reflection on that this shouldn't exist. That's a reflection that we as a student government failed this semester to make that programming. That does not mean we should get rid of that programming. That just means we need to be better in the future. I yield.
Senator Rose. Sure. I just want to clarify, this is not for or against the points being made. I just want to clarify that the Wellness and Inclusion contract did get updated this year, so they have to host more events than what was previously required. And the only line that they can use is the events line. So just as a general information, not one way or the other. Webb?
I completely agree with your statement. If you look under the description of it, though, it says it's being merged. So I think it's getting rid of the line so it's all in one line. So it's not two separate entities in the line, so it's getting merged. So I think it still can be used for DEI funds, if I'm reading this correctly. Yeah, I'm going to yield to Treasurer Weddle.
Yes, and to kind of build off what Webb said and what our chair added, now those events are required, right? They're contractually required now for some of our officers once the contract bill passes. The SGU sponsored events just allows us to be a lot more broad. The DEI programming line for this year, it wasn't used until the end of March. That was the first time it was used for all of this year, and it was used, out of the 3 times that it's been used this year, 2 of those have been sponsoring other events hosted by other organizations on campus that we were contributing to, which is a great thing to do. But programming, we have a programming board, right? If there's concerns about the number of events that fall under the umbrella of DEI, I really think those should be brought more to the organization that we have in charge of programming. Student government does not have a lot of funding for programming to begin with, right? If there's concerns about the number of events that are considered multicultural, right? Absolutely bring it up to student government, but we don't have a large budget for programming to begin with. That's why it was zeroed out and merged with SGU events, because overall our programming budget saw a decrease this year for activities that are meant for the entirety of the student body. We used to have 2,000 under DEI programming, 1,000 under SGU sponsored events. Now we just have 1,000 all told for both of those combined. The student government executive branch doesn't have a lot of money for programming because we have organizations, subsidiaries, and all sorts of other groups that do programming. This is to provide funding for programming as is contractually required for some of our officers, while still ensuring that the main responsibilities of student government are upheld, and our organizations that provide a lot more activities on campus have the funds that they need to do what they need to do. I yield.
Our advisor.
Yeah, I think that's really loud. Sorry. I think you bring up a lot of good points, but the one thing I will mention is that as Webb's advisor, I always advise them against doing cultural programming, and I say that because it's very difficult for one group to provide programming for every culture, and Webb's job is primarily to be the fun events, right? Something that's inclusive for everybody. I would recommend, if you are struggling to find events or think that there should be more programming on campus for different cultures, to bring it to the multicultural office. In addition, Webb doesn't have a wellness and inclusion committee, but SGU does. I will also mention that it doesn't look like the lines were necessarily merged. It looks like the purpose of them was merged, but the funding of it was not. So it was $1,000, and it's still $1,000, so instead you're just cutting. So I just think it's difficult in that regard to say that they are merged, because they're really not. But I just wanted to bring that up, as Webb doesn't usually do cultural events. I yield.
All right. Just as a point of information on kind of 2 things. One is the contracts, just to make it clear, that contractual obligation thing, that was updated last semester, that has already passed, so those are in contracts currently, it's not waiting on the contract update. The other thing too is that a new catering line was added, and that is the major cost of events is the catering line, so that's kind of where that money went. We're going to start with Senator Beckman.
Thank you. My hand is getting tired. I would like to add to, this was mainly in response to Priscilla's point of there's not a lot of multicultural events. There are. They run through clubs. Amna ran an amazing event that I loved the food at. Multi-varsity Club is incredibly active. If you want your culture to have a celebration, make it yourself. I would love if there was a Spanish culture club, but I'm not doing it. So someone else is. If you want, Priscilla, Eastern Asian, like a Japanese, I would assume, club, do it. You can get funding. Max will give you funding. And
all right, I'm
so
just
I
going
don't
to give a brief
yield,
point of
yeah.
order. Just please refer to the horseshoe members by the title and last name.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. My point's made. I yield.
Okay. Senator Novak.
I just wanted to say, because I know this is a tiny bit repeating my point, but I'm repeating it for good reason, just because it seems it was misinterpreted. My big thing about them being merged is not that it doesn't allow us to not have those events, because yes, if it's merged, we can still have those events, still use the funding. My problem just is that it leads to the possibility that we won't use the funding at all for those events, because those funding, having a reserve, the reason why we have reserved lines for specific types of events and stuff like that is it makes sure we will have funding for those events. If we merge it into all one line, there is the possibility that other events will take all that funding before another event can then use it. So the purpose of the DI line was to make sure we would have funding when we did those events, and we wouldn't have to worry about it all being taken up by other events. I yield.
Wildcat Media.
I just wanted to bring up the concern I had. If, let's say, every year we don't always fill our horseshoe, we don't always fill all positions. In the case of not having anyone hired in the director of wellness and inclusion position, would it then be on the committee to hold those events? Is that, I yield back to the chair.
Yeah, sure. To kind of clarify that, the chief of staff is the one who directly oversees. Alternatively, the president is also supposed to fill in on any duties that are not directly delegated. So they can usually delegate them to the chief of staff, considering that they're directly oversee. The committee would still be the one that, would be gone to for the event. So, but like, there wouldn't be a direct fill-in, but one position would be filled in because the position has to be filled in. Okay, go ahead and put their hand down. Pro Temp Ludowan.
So, again, the events line is now a total of $1,000. The DEI, the Wellness and Inclusion Director, has a number of event requirements per semester. While I recognize we do have a catering line, that is currently $2,500, and that is only for catering. If we are meant to be doing cultural and wellness related events, we're not only going to have food at them, and then we have $1,000 that we're sharing for all executive SGU related events. I simply do not think this is enough for the wellness director to carry out their duties contractually.
How many contracted things do they have to do?
2 a semester.
2 a semester, okay.
Alrighty. Senator Rose. President Lunaharo.
I want to echo Pro Tem Ludowan's points. In addition, the SGU catering already involves the Professional Development Day, which is mandatory events that we have to do, and on top of that, we'll have to do as well the additional DEI. So just putting that out there. I yield.
CFP.
I'd like to kind of go back to Senator Beckman's point about our club being able to help host these events. We have a multicultural student union club. We have the Muslim Student Association. We have the University Christian Faith Club, Fellowship. We have all these clubs that SGU can work with. It's not. Sorry, that threw me off. But
there's options, and I know that the funding looks very limited within SGU as a whole, but these clubs are still part of SGU. That's still the same student activities fees that can be used and asked to help collab with, because that helps promote the clubs, that helps promote SGU. Like, just because the money isn't in our line directly for DEI programming doesn't mean it can't be accomplished through other means, and means that I would say are, as the CFB president, would prefer happen, so we can get more involvement between our, not yet, anyway, stop, to create a stronger relationship between the SGU, the Horseshoe, and our clubs. I yield.
Chief Justice Wu.
Instead of arguing back and forth, would anyone like to make a motion regarding keeping funding or anything like that? I yield.
Senator Novak.
I will make a motion, but first I just wanted to also state, one of the points was, why didn't I try to do this through the Wellness and Inclusion Committee? I did. I suggested multiple East Asian events that we could do, and they will shut down in favor of doing events such as doing the interfaith event, which I believe was mostly Abrahamic faiths in that. I don't know. I was not able to go to that because of a committee at the time. And I was also, I was shut down for my event ideas for doing East Asian events. So I did try to work through the committee, and I was told no. So I just wanted to put that out there. Second of all, I'd like to make a motion to re-add or like re-edit the, I don't know the exact way the property was, but to change GI programming to be 2025, 2026, 2000s, change the dash or null, and then 2026, 2027, 2000s.
Alrighty, we have a motion to re-add the $2,000 that were in the DEI programming line. Is there a second? Second by Pro Temp Ludewan. Moving into discussion of the amendment. Pro Temp Ludewan.
Can I make a motion that's not related to this over it? Or?
It depends on the motion.
Oh. Forum?
Yeah, it is above it. You still have the floor.
Motion to push back open forum to 1:50 p.m.
All right, we have a motion to push back open forum to 1:50
p.m.
p.m. Okay. Is there a second? Second by Senator Capo. Is there any discussion for pushing back open forum?
They don't get discussion for that.
Not outlined. Thank you. Okay. Going to voting on pushing back open forum. All those in favor of pushing back open forum? All those opposed? And all those who abstain? That passes 8-1-1. All right, back in discussion of the motion made to re-add in the DI line, starting with Treasurer Weddle.
If I can ask the senator to rescind their motion and to make another motion clarifying where this $2,000 is coming out of. Again, I would very much like to keep a balanced budget. I'm not opposed to necessarily restoring funding for DEI programming, but we really shouldn't be pulling money out of thin air. So insofar as respecting that, I would like that $2,000 to come from somewhere. I yield to Senator Novak.
I rescind my motion, and then I'll make a motion to change outdoor programming from the summary to 83,000, and respectively changing all of that to represent 83,000, and then restoring DI programming to be 2,000.
I believe what she's trying to take from is the reserves. Can we do that?
I mean, you can take from literally any part of the budget. Treasurer Weddle?
Yeah, so to clarify that a little bit, the reserves allocation is not part of our operating budget. It's a reserves designation. So you can reduce it by $2,000, but that doesn't change our overall operating budget. Our overall operating budget is based off our revenue, which is $583,000. So far, we've budgeted $583,000. So if you want to add $2,000 to DEI programming, you have to take $2,000 from somewhere else in the budget. So that's going to be one of the lines under SGU, under CFB or media, and so on. I yield.
All right. Webb?
Gotten to read those numbers yet, so can we even do that?
I mean, you can. The
You
change,
can?
like such as the trickle-down change with the previous reserves allocation, like it can trickle down to other points, and you can make things from other points, but it won't be discussed until we get there. No.
Right?
We got a second.
No, we didn't.
I believe we got one from Capo.
I didn't say it.
That was for open forum. I am so sorry. Apologies.
I mean, I
I
was gonna
thought
send it.
that second was for. Okay. I thought that second was for that motion. My apologies. Then we are not in a motion. Is there a second for the motion? Seeing none, that motion dies. Is there really no second? Okay. Is there any further discussion for SGU's allocation? President Lunaharo.
So I'd like to suggest everybody here in the horseshoe that we keep the special projects line, but maybe with a bit more of a specification. One of my main suggestions that I have brought up with Treasurer Weddle informally was the use of this line to test initiatives and pilot initiatives used by student government. For example, if for whatever reason we wanted to test central buses earlier on in the year, we could have had maybe 20 central bus passes initially just to see the interest, or for whatever other reasons we want to test an initiative for student government for whatever reason. So with that being said, I'd like to entertain a motion to move the additional $1,000 from SGU sponsored equipment into special projects.
We have a motion to move the extra $1,000 in equipment to the special projects line. Is there so heard? So heard by Senator Beckman, second by Senator Pena. Going to discussion of the amendment. President Lunaharo.
In addition, this line will essentially just only be used for testing things. It's not going to be final. If in the case where we decide to implement anything, this will actually protect our reserves to be spent on initiatives that haven't been proven to be successful yet. So in the case where, for example, you test something for 2 weeks using the special projects line, right? And then you see that the initiatives looks really well, you can make a reserves pool to finalize it and structure it within an actual throughout the rest of the year. I don't know if that clarifies it a little bit more, but I yield.
Webb.
Sorry,
Yeah. So the line is coming out of equipment purchases. There's been a change of adding $1,000 to equipment purchases. It's 54001. So instead of adding to equipment purchases, it will be moving to special projects. I yield.
All right. Is there any discussion for the amendments? Wildcat Esports.
Can I get the reasoning behind adding the 1,000 to sponsored equipment this year?
Yeah, so to clarify SGU sponsored equipment, it's a very broad line. It's for any equipment that student government purchases. So this includes whenever we need to replace something in the game room, we buy new equipment through that line. Whenever we need to purchase equipment for our office space, that would also be through that line. If we want to buy equipment generally, I mean, pretty much any piece of equipment that student government, the executive branch specifically, ever needs to buy would go through that line. For comparison, under media, for example, they have a studio equipment line, so any of their equipment, that's what they buy, so that would be anything that we need to buy. We're not buying very expensive media equipment, but if we need to buy new keyboards, if we need to buy a new monitor for a computer, if we need to buy new mice, if we need to buy webcams, if we need to buy new cue sticks for the game room, if we need to buy new signage for anywhere on campus that student government was, representing, it would come from that line. That's why it was increased. For some context, just this semester, we've spent about $670 from that line. We've used most of it. The other use, I would say, of that line, as I'm sure Senator Fisher would be happy to tell you, if there's any equipment purchases for the Student Center specifically that Student Center Committee or any of our committees wanted to make, if it was an equipment purchase, it would come out of that line. There's been discussion about replacing the TV that's mounted right over there. That would come out of that line if it wasn't done through a reserves pool. So it's really any of those items. I'm going to yield back to our esports representative if there's any clarification.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Treasurer Weddle. I think because of that, we should avoid taking money out of SGU sponsored equipment. And my reasoning behind that is special projects, as Treasurer Weddle had mentioned earlier in his reasoning, we're going to be using reserve pools for special projects. I
CFP?
I'm not really for or against the changing of the special projects, but I would like to ask a question to our treasurer. If the Senate would want to make this happen, is there a line that you would suggest they take the money from? I yield.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Beckman?
Every one of these arguments made for
We're
special-
now an open forum. So, is there any discussion for open forum? Wildcat Media.
When are the Mohawk air conditioners gonna work? That's my question. I know. Only yours, because you're in an RA suite.
I'm in an RA suite and it doesn't work.
Oh.
I was just like, I don't know, air conditioning. I yield to the president.
You can ask our Res Life representative.
All right. Please keep the chatter down. Thank you. Is there any other discussion for open forum? Treasurer Weddle?
Yeah, so to respond to our CFP representative's earlier question, there's not really any particular line that's...
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. We're not in discussion of a legislation at this time.
I'm not allowed to make a comment on pending
The
legislation?
comment was made during the discussion, so it's part of the discussion. CFB.
A question to our treasurer. I know we discussed earlier if there had a suggestion of which line could be cut to help fund this.
Again,
if the
this
Senate
is
were
part
to
of
do so.
discussion for the resolution. Chief Justice Wu.
I would like everyone to consider for next year, we get an adult-sized swing set on campus with the outdoor project line. Thank you.
I would like to ask that any chatter be died down. Thank you. Is there any other discussion for open forum? Our audience member.
Hi, I just wanted to speak out about our recent election, the process of how it was basically just thought through, voted on, and whatnot, and as well as the future of our student government and the path that it is leading towards. Specifically, the election committee, I think it was pretty unjust the way it was mannered. At a time where student engagement is extremely low, and we are always trying to find volunteers, audience members, or even people to take initiatives and action. I believe there was nothing wrong when it came to that, but because of policy and procedures, things happened that just weren't right, I believe, and as well as many other students believe. And as for the future of student government, our current policies have become a government of just saying no, whether it's doing a campaign, an initiative, or even trying to change something on campus. You constantly always will have to go through 5 levels of approval in order to do the tiniest thing. Even just to submit resolutions, you have to get them approved at multiple levels. So honestly, I just think next year we should rework our policies and procedures to more focus towards change. And it honestly isn't even a lack of student leaders, because even this year we had a great show out for the horseshoe, and in the future people have commented about how they don't want to really get involved anymore, especially with the way things are going and the restrictive policies of just saying no, and where we value a rigid, outdated system rather than the value of the outcome and the change it brings. And yeah, I yield.
Our audience member.
I just wanted to say, I think petition policy needs to be updated to reflect the limitations that are put in the student handbook. The only reason why I'm saying this is because currently under petition policy, it's under like SGU policy. It doesn't give any restrictions on where you can do the petition, how you can do the petition, or where you can ask signatures. There's nothing that restricts being able to go to a club and ask people at a club to do it, being able to go to an event and asking people to sign it, or being able to go to the campus center, res halls, whatever. And so it's a bit confusing if you want to do a petition where you are allowed to do a petition, and I don't think we should be forced to cross-reference between student handbook and SGU policies for petition stuff. I also think the petition portal is a bit stupid. The petition paper should be under student government and not under petition portal, because you don't know the petition portal exists unless you really ask the vice president of student government, where do you get petition paper? I yield.
Alrighty, is there any further? Yes, our advisor.
Onto that, I guess it's important to note that whether you are acting in your role as a senator, whether you're acting as your role as a student with a petition, whether you are a candidate, whether you are tabling for SGU, any time that you are on campus as a student here, you always have to follow the student handbook. So while, if you are getting a petition signed, you still have to follow all of the solicitation policies. That includes res halls, dining halls, all of the things. You have to remember that you are bound by the student handbook no matter what you are doing. So please be sure to keep that in mind, that although it is not in the student government policies and procedures, it's still in the student handbook. That's like me, I don't know, stealing from the dining area and saying, oh, well, I'm an SGU, so I was just doing an experiment for SGU. No. If you're working as a student, you just have to follow the student handbook. So please keep that in mind at all times. I'm going to yield to Kathy.
All right.
Thanks. I just want to kind of speak to Director of PR. Sorry, I couldn't remember your title for a second. Completely agree with the going forward. I think you made some great points, and we have discussed in election committee as well as my staff and Center for Student Involvement of things that will be changing for the election in the fall to alleviate some of these things that have come up this year, last year, all the things to make things a little bit more concise and clear and understanding for all. So I appreciate your comments and definitely taken into consideration. Yield.
Well,
We can't do campaigning in res halls. It's because of the student handbook, or is it SGU? And then my second part question, Tiara asked me for posters for events to put up in Mohawk. Am I allowed to do that then if you can't put posters up in the thing? I'm going to yield back to Advisor Artigiani.
Yeah, so it's a campus policy,
Okay.
not soliciting in the residence halls. And basically the rationale for that is that's your home. It would be no different than if you were at your permanent home and someone knocked on your door and just walked in and tried to sell you a vacuum cleaner. Like, it's safe space for students. But it is a SUNY poly policy within the handbook. Events is not considered solicitation, so you're fine posting with that.
Okay.
I yield.
yeah, actually, just to add on to that a little bit, in the handbook, you do have to get both approval from CSI and the resident advisor for doing that in it. But if you got both of that, then yeah, there's not anything about that. So I just reviewed the student handbook. Cool. President Lunahara?
I'd also like to bring a concern that has been brought up to me. This is not targeted towards our CFB representative whatsoever, but but there has been a lot of new clubs that has approached me as the SGU president and mentioned how difficult it is to get set up as a new club within CFB, especially with all the requirements. I understand that CFB has done their due diligence and maximum effort in order to make things as easy as possible for the clubs. But I just wanted to bring this concern up, and I'll try and get the person in contact with CFB to ensure that that line of communication is set. Yield.
Senator Novak?
On similar regards to our president, I've had multiple club executives come to me over this last academic year, or last 2 academic years really, saying that they feel like how CFB has been going and how changes have been in policy, that the quote them exactly, it's an exact quote from them, it is no longer fun to run a club. It is only stressful. In fact, it is more stressful than doing my classes, was the exact quote given to me. And this has been a precedent I've seen from other club executives. So I guess just for noting for, I guess, future changes or future looking into it. I mean, I will talk to him, tell him to talk to CFB, so that way they can actually get this done. And that's what it looks like, it's not just me saying this, but just, I guess, just wanted to put that out there since the president brought it up. I yield.
All right, we have now lost quorum. And do you have a final comment to make?
Yeah, I just want to bring up to the horseshoe, I do get the concerns, but again, I've never turned down a meeting with anybody looking for help, so please just tell them to reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to help. If it's not me directly, it'll be my staff, but they're just as knowledgeable as I am. I yield.
We are now adjourned at 1:59.